Hi guys, welcome to Revive Stronger podcast. It's me, Steve Hall, and today I am joined by Jeff Alberts from 3DMJ. So I think this is maybe the third time Jeff has been on the podcast now, so it's been a while, probably too long, but Jeff has been busy and doing things on his end, and that is something we're going to be talking about today. So a lot of this discussion is going to be around Jeff's recent contest prep and just his past experiences and some gold that I think we can hopefully kind of draw out from Jeff and give you some really key experiences from his prep. So I don't know if Jeff, you want to start out with where you are now, where you've come from this season, how it's all gone, and then maybe we can see where we go.
All right. So yeah, I'd say where I'm coming from is obviously the 2019 contest season, where the last show of the season was the WNBF Worlds, and that was show number 7. So I did 7 shows over the course of this last prep. But recently, the last 4 days, I've been enjoying our Thanksgiving holidays here in the States. Haven't tracked anything since the day before Thanksgiving. And right now I'm feeling a little bloated. So I'm like, okay, time to go back to bodybuilding. So, and right now I'm having my coffee talking to you, Steve. So that's kind of where I'm at. So I'll let you kind of guide the conversation because you're really good at that.
I'll try.
You get a lot out of me. So let's go for it.
So yeah, Jeff, 7 competitions, that's a lot. And actually my first kind of starting question was kind of how long had your prep been? Like when did you start, and has it all been linear? How many have there been maintenance periods, diet breaks within there?
Yeah, so it was 7 shows. 5 of them were competitive. 2 of them were guest posing, which I did take pretty seriously. Tried to peak my best for them because I want to make sure that, you know, I'm giving my best look for the audience. You know, they pay good money, so take it serious. But the prep started back in September of 2018, the beginning, and it ended in November 16th, 2019. So it was 14 months. And I know for some they're going to be like, oh my gosh, that is so long. But like you said, it really wasn't linear. There was like phases. You know, I would take diet breaks, you know, refeeds, anniversaries, holidays, birthdays, date nights with my wife. So it wasn't like this full bore hardcore mentality for 14 months. It was more like a lifestyle, learning how to blend prep life with real life as good as I can. So it's more about picking my spots, when to kind of push and back off.
And do you think that's something that you're using specifically in your situation, not necessarily something you'd recommend as a standard, because obviously you're later in your career, you're very well developed, so you haven't got kind of time to lose too much of?
Well, I mean, think about the experience level. Like here I am, this is my 33rd year of training that I just accomplished as of yesterday. So, you know, if I would say, hey, Jeff, you know, as a 22-year-old, when I first did my first prep, hey, we're going to do this lifestyle prep. Yeah, I don't think that probably would have went over too well, just because I didn't know much about bodybuilding as a whole, but I didn't know much about myself back then either. So I think it just makes sense now, you know, as a veteran bodybuilder, that, you know, again, I have that experience level to know when to kind of, you know, turn the on-off switch, you know, either on or off, or turn it down, turn it up. And it's kind of interesting because there was moments in this prep where I took myself back to my first prep when I lost 30 pounds in 6 weeks. So it's about 14 kilos in 6 weeks. Like, that's not the smartest thing to do. But when I went through that, it taught me how to grind and how to persevere. So there was moments of this prep where it was kind of reminiscent of that. Like right before my first show, The Mayhem, you know, I brought Eric on board, Eric Helms. I'm like, hey, you know, I don't need the X's and O's from you. I just need the accountability. I need to go there because we're a little bit behind as far as like getting me to the Mayhem in decent enough shape to where I wouldn't embarrass myself. I really wanted to do that show. It is our 10-year anniversary for 3DMJ. I really want to get on stage with Eric. So I'm like, hey, let's make sure I'm on board, I'm accountable. And I had to grind for like 8 weeks. I was grinding like 6 low days, 1 high day. Like, and I couldn't deviate. There was no date nights at that point. So I had to tell my wife, hey, we need to, you know, just so you know, the next, you know, 8 weeks, I'm going to go there. And, you know, I can't really be having my glass of wine with you on the weekend. So it was moments like that I had to, you know, kind of dig, which was kind of cool because I used a lot of my experience level over the years in different spots of the prep.
And when you're kind of describing grind, I think we hear it all the time. People talk about it and people have a somewhat of an idea, but what did that mean for you? Obviously it was like a lifestyle prep, and then the grind was not lifestyle. So what, on a day-to-day basis, what was it looking like? How were you feeling? What were kind of some of the things to you that means you're grinding?
Yeah, it just meant, okay, my calories were like, okay, we need to drop them down to about 1,700, which is fairly low for a guy my size. And it meant like prior to, grinding, it was like the refeeds 2 a week on the weekends. Sometimes it'd be loose, like, okay, we're up to like 600 or 700 grams of carbs. And Eric's like, hey, we need to kind of stay on top of the refeeds, be more accountable with them. So it's more or less, okay, let me make sure they're 100% tracked. And like I said, no wine or anything like that. Like, let's make sure that we're kind of capping the carbs, no more than 500, no more 600 or 700, to ensure that I was getting that rate of progress that we were looking for. So it's just more or less just buckling down, like from an adherence standpoint, like, okay, your adherence needs to be 100% or 95% instead of, 80, 85, 90. So it's just going another level was basically kind of what that means.
Yeah. How did you feel? Did you was it like you went from, oh, this is okay to this sucks? Was it what was that? Did you suddenly have lower energy levels, food focus? Did that increase?
What's interesting? It wasn't so much like, I know what to expect with hunger levels. Like I know, okay, dropping food, increasing steps, like grinding harder. I'm like, okay, yeah, I'm going to feel less energetic at times. I'm going to feel more hungry, but I embraced that as part of the process. Like I know that's what it is. So I didn't have like a negative mindset around it. So it didn't really bother me too much. I mean, yeah, I did feel those things, but I'm just used to it. It was more the time component that bothered me more so. Like, obviously, when you got to increase your step count, that's more time. So it meant like, okay, I have to get up early in the morning and knock that out so I don't interrupt the family. It actually meant, too, on some of the days I was doing doubling the cardio. So steps in the morning, steps in the evening. So it's just time away from the family. And that's what was bugging me. It was more of a guilt feeling. Like, here I am, I'm already like not 100% myself. Obviously when we're prepping, I don't care how good we try to balance this thing out, you're never going to be the same. Like that's proven to me the last 2 weeks. I've been eating more food. My family loves me a lot more already. So I already know. So it was just more of like the time aspect of it, and just the guilt, like knowing that, okay, what I'm going to be doing over the next 2 month stretch, it's going to sacrifice a little bit of, a little bit of my time and energy towards the family a little bit. And that's what bugged me the most about it.
I absolutely can see that. I know from when I've dieted and come out of the diet, I thought I felt great. And then you on more food and you're like, oh, this is what great feels like. And then everyone else can notice that as well.
How it is when you're in the middle of something. You're like, oh, this is kind of normal, right? That's what you think. And then you come out of it and you're like, oh yeah, that's not normal. So yeah, that's kind of what I'm experiencing again now. It's like, this is more normal as far as life.
And you mentioned steps, and I'm not sure if steps was something you used in previous preps, and kind of what made you use them, and in terms of step count, what was yours looking like? How high did it go?
Probably not as high as maybe some of you guys do over there in your side of the world, but I mean, for here, like typical step count for me on average would be like anywhere between 3,000 and 5,000, and that's because obviously I'm a desk guy. So I would typically run cardio, like some light intensity recumbent biking. But I also know that I wanted to get myself more active throughout the day outside of, hey, I just want to jump on my recumbent. So I'm like, let me lean on steps more because I can equate that, quantify it a little bit better. So I went to steps and I got as high as, like before the mayhem, I got as high as like 17, 18,000 a day, which for me is like, we're talking like triple the amount that I was typically doing. And what ended up happening is about a week and a half before mayhem, I got severe tibialis tendonitis, a walking injury, right? How funny, right? You wouldn't think like walking, you would get an injury, but yeah, I got tendonitis, and actually on stage, I could hardly pose. Like I literally barely got through the prejudging. My ankle was so swollen throughout the day. Everybody's looking at my ankle going, oh my gosh. I'm like, yeah. And I was literally had to get off my feet that day. It's so bad. So I realized, okay, the season's still very young. Like this is July of 2019. I want to go to Worlds in November. That's a long stretch. I'm like, so I knew, okay, I can't keep the walking up. So I went back to the recumbent bike. So for me, it's like, okay, every 30 minutes a recumbent bike, it's about the equivalent of like 4,000 or 5,000 steps. So I kind of just quantified it that way. Yeah. So I was like doing maybe anywhere between 45 to an hour of recumbent bike a day, maybe 5-6 days a week for the remainder of prep. I'd pull back at times sometimes, but that was kind of like the average.
Did you find you preferred the steps, like being able to get out rather than being stationary, or?
Yeah. So that was a huge thing too, is my wife's like, why don't you get out of the house? So I was like, okay. So every morning I would get up and go walk, and we have some nice levees here by my house. It's got some nice scenery. And just getting outside and getting some fresh air just kind of set the tone for the day. And then, like I said, I just got to a point where I couldn't walk anymore. So I went back to the recumbent. And then I said, you know what? Let me buy myself a bike, a real bike, like a good one. So I bought a decent bike to actually ride outside. So I was doing a lot of bike riding in the mornings outside as opposed to just sitting here inside. And I think for me too, especially working from home, I mean, you know how it is, you work from home. It's like sometimes when you're indoors for hours on end, it can be depressing.
Yeah.
So just getting outside, even if it's for 45 minutes to an hour, and get some fresh air, pedaling the bike, it just kind of sets a good tone for the rest of the day.
Yeah. No, I definitely see that. And I think the use of steps has definitely become more of a known tool, kind of getting the NEAT, as we've become more aware that that's an important aspect. So it's interesting to see, even though there's still a limit to how much you can kind of push that, because I don't think you're alone in the issues with injuries from steps being so high. I think I've heard other competitors where they've had to have pushed their steps and then they've got like a foot injury of some sort. So that's not fun either.
I can't have even resorted to like mowing the lawns, washing my car, vacuuming, staying more active that way, because we both know, like, as those calories come down, especially towards the end, it can make us more lethargic. So if we're not aware, we could actually make ourselves even more lethargic and moving even less. So it kind of is counterproductive when you lower those calories down, if you don't keep your activity level up. So that's what I was trying to stay aware of. And that's why I was like, kind of now we rely more on step count, because you can quantify the activity level a little bit better.
Fantastic. And actually, something I wanted to ask nearer the start of this interview, at least, was in terms of obviously previous preps. I don't know, I think it was the last 2 years you'd kind of attempted to, or you'd planned to go to stage and it hadn't quite followed through like you wanted to. And I would love to hear what was the difference between this prep, and then also I'm personally, and I might have to remind you of this question, but I'm personally really thankful that you shared that you did kind of attempt to go to stage and it never quite kind of worked out, because I think a lot of people do that, and you only see the people that go to stage, and there's a lot of people that try and end up falling flat on their face because for whatever reason. So it's almost an accomplishment for anyone to actually get to stage, as long as they're in kind of stage ready condition. So yeah, I'd love to hear kind of what happened this time versus the other times. What made this so successful versus those?
Yeah, so I think the huge reason why I was successful this time around of actually getting on stage was because of that failed prep. Like, I definitely needed to go through that to learn more about myself, because ego kind of got in the way with that last prep where it failed. And I didn't realize that I was dealing with a little bit of a older body. So my mind was still thinking I was like on the top of the world, right? 2014, had my best ever season, placed top 5 at Worlds, won the Pro International. So I'm like, okay, cool. I can just keep doing the same thing, and I'll get back on stage in 2017, 2018, just as good, if not better. But I started running into issues with injuries, aches, pains. And just the bottom line is, like, my ego didn't want to let go of certain exercises. They didn't want to let go of like deadlifting, squatting. And those are the squatting more in particular was the reason why I kept getting banged up, like my lower back, I had like 3 or 4 lower back strains. So after the first one, I'm like, okay, that happens, right? You get these little, injuries every once in a while. Okay, let's rehab it a little bit, and then, just taper it back in slowly and work up. Well, I did that pretty successfully. And then out of the blue, my back said, nope, not today, and got another injury. And being hard-headed, I'm like, no, I'm going to rehab this. Because in my mind, 2014, coming off a terrific 2013 off season where hit PRs and squats as a 42-year-old. I'm like, okay, hit a 460 squat. My lower body looked the best it ever had, at the age of 43. So I'm like, I got to get back to that. So I kept trying to squat. And then finally I'm like, why am I trying to beat a dead horse here? So I'm like, okay, stop squatting. Kind of phased out deadlifting with RDL, and just learn that, okay, my body's not what it once was. Like, I don't have that recovery ability that I once did. And in a sense, learning how to train again with an older body. It's almost like I was a newbie again, like having to learn all over again. So it was just a long process, right? It was like a year and a half, 2 years of trying to get on stage with an ego, right? And it just didn't happen. And then a 6-month off season of letting go of that mindset and like, okay, open my mind up. Let's try some new things and let's try to figure this out. And here we are. Like, just through the prep, I even had some injuries that I had to like learn as I go. And what I got better at was like letting go of ego and just like, okay, I can't squat. Let's do, leg press. Okay, I can't RDL. Let's do hyperextensions. So through the prep, I had tore my upper pec doing RDLs because I got, I was just, the load was so heavy. Like every week I was like, okay, I'm doing, over 4 plates regularly. And then all of a sudden my body probably just got to a certain level of leanness, leverage wasn't there. And I felt my upper pec rip. And luckily for me, I was still able to do like decline pressing on my Smith, like a shortened range of motion. So it's like, okay, instead of having that ego, like, let me try to force like a flat press full range of motion. Let's go with what I can do. And that's how I kind of rolled. So big nutshell is just like I said, just learning how to, prep and bodybuild with an older body.
Yeah.
And I think now that I'm probably like 3 or 4 years deep into this transformation, like I got a pretty good stranglehold on it. So fingers crossed, I can make it till I'm 50 the next time I plan on getting on stage. So it's like I learned a lot through that failed prep. Like if I would have just had that closed-minded ego trying to, fight through it instead of trying to work around it more so, then I probably wouldn't have been able to get on stage again. I'd probably been like, yeah, I'm done. I'm retired. My body just can't do it anymore.
Yeah, it's unfortunate. I think a lot of us, the people listening, bodybuilders, we're very hard-headed, which sometimes is brilliant because it means we can do things that a lot of people can't kind of consistently stick to. But then when we can't consistently stick to what we think or love or what it is providing results, it gets really tricky. And we're sticklers for routine. So I know if I love squats as well. I love deadlifts and kind of removing them for periods of time. I always benefit, but it's always, I do it at like just the last moment, just when squats are starting to hurt rather than before they were hurting or something like that. And obviously your case is like with your age and everything like that, it's just, you've been training for 33 years. So that's probably more time than a lot of the listeners here have been alive on the earth. So I can see how that can happen. And the great thing with bodybuilding is, like you said, although you're slightly limited maybe because of your garage gym, but you actually have got quite a bit of kit in there now. So that's good to see. You don't need particular movements, do you? So
not really. I mean, like through this prep, because we went from like heavy RDLs to hyperextensions for like, I would say probably the last 3 or 4 months of the prep. And, Eric's like, hey, just go to our, hyperextension. Your muscle ain't gonna go anywhere. So that's basically what I did. So I was, doing hyperextensions anywhere between, 10 to 15 rep range and, maybe one rep in reserve more times than not. Maybe the last set, maybe take it to failure, but nothing. It was like, you think about, how hard the leverage is on your body, like 4 plates in an RDL versus holding a 90-pound dumbbell. It's the burden on your body is going to be less than, but you're still having enough intensity there and enough volume there to hold on to muscle. Mm-hmm. And the thing too is like when we're prepping, we realize like it doesn't take as much as we think to hold on to muscle. Mm-hmm. So when the calories obviously start coming up, it's like, how much more do we need to do as far as our training? Do we need to really overhaul it a ton, or just having enough food and getting yourself out of that depleted state you'll be on the up and up. And that's kind of what I've experienced the last couple of weeks since I've, brought food up from the season, is I already feel more pliable in the weight room. Like towards the end there was like every set I'm doing, I'm like, don't break, Jeff, don't break. Where it's like I'm getting confidence now, like I'm feeling a little bit better, like a little more pliable. But that was like the biggest thing, like going from that failed prep, was just learning how to train again, with a different body, and just understanding that, okay, I always thought I did a pretty good job at not being hard-headed, but it was like, okay, I still have to even get better at that. Because like you said, as bodybuilders, we don't want to be sissies or anything like that. We want to push ourselves. And that's basically what my mistake was, is I tried to push that prep probably about 4 months longer than it needed to be. Like I needed to call it quits before that, but my mindset was like, no, don't fail. You can't fail. You got to keep persevering. And it wasn't until I took some progress photos and looked at my pictures and went, yeah, I look pretty bad. We need to stop. So I was like, okay, let's get out of a deficit. Let's start eating again. Let's put some weight on and get myself, in a better environment to, rebuild the tissue I lost, and actually try to make some gains again in the off season and get myself to a better starting point to kind of restart a prep. So from April of 2018 to September of 2018, that 6 months, basically I put on about, I would say 20 pounds, about 8 or 9 kilos, and just, got myself training again in a healthy state. And I saw, even though I was heavier, I can see my physique totally just changed. Like, okay, that's the old Jeff. I think we can do this again. And it was just changing the approach heading into 2019, as far as the training approach.
Fantastic. And I just wanted to circle back because this came into my head and I've just remembered it. But when we mentioned you were grinding, for that period of time, as the general recommendations are, as you get leaner, as the diet progresses, your rate of loss falls with that. So maybe starting at 1%, dropping to 0.5% of body weight loss per week, and then slowly going down. With the weeks of grinding, is that something where you pick that rate of loss up, or is that just grinding to get to the target rate of loss, the lower rate of loss, or is that something where you purposely kind of dig a bit faster than maybe you'd recommend on paper?
Yeah, so personally, for me personally, I'm talking about me, not just everybody in general, but me personally, it's like I feel comfortable around a half a pound a week. But that stretch that we're talking about, the 8 weeks leading up to the first show with Eric, we're like, okay, we need to get at least a pound off. So we're kind of doubling that rate, which is still not too aggressive. It's still fairly in line. And when I got to the Mayhem, it wasn't my leanest state. It was more like, okay, we got another 4 or 5 pounds we need to lose still. So I wasn't dying, but it definitely was intensifying the prep, because it meant not just okay, now we have to drop calories down, increase those steps so the demand goes up. So it puts a little more burden on your training, obviously, because, you're using up, resources. But again, it was more of an increased stress from a life standpoint, because there was, like I said, okay, now it's more time away from family. And for me, that elevates my stress, knowing that I'm not going to be fully present for my family. So I had stress levels getting more intense through that 8-week stretch, outside of just hey, I'm dropping calories and increasing the step count. So that was kind of I would say one of the harder stints that I had during the prep was that 8 weeks. Prior to that, it was more or less okay, let's start the prep. Let's how it is. You start the prep, even if you drop some calories down, it doesn't have to be aggressive. You start to kind of lose some bloat. So the first 10 pounds was relatively easy from September all the way till, last December, Christmas time. It was take 10 pounds off. Now let's chill through the holidays. So a 2 weeks where I just, hey, let's just stay at maintenance. I actually gained a couple pounds back over the holidays. And then January, let's start back up again. So it was more phases. I was taking little pieces off here and there. And then it wasn't until, like I said, 8 weeks before that Mayhem show where it's okay, we're actually this is what prep life is about, really. Yeah. So that kind of, like I said, it took me back to my first ever prep, mentality switched. And then after the Mayhem, it was, hey, Sam Okunola, I had one first place vote against him. He's one of the best in the world. Okay, I'm going to do the next show in Florida and see if I can actually get a couple more judges to swing my way. So it was more or less more grinding after that. I took like a 4-day diet break after the first show. Enjoyed life a little bit. I'm like, okay, now we're gonna dig again, but it didn't change anything. It was just more of the same. Like obviously the 8 weeks lead in mayhem worked. Keep doing it. So I didn't really change anything. We just dug for another. It was like a 4-week stretch, I think, 4 or 5, somewhere in there. Got a couple pounds leaner and got the same result. Sam still beat me, but I don't think I had one first place vote that show.
He's a big boy.
But what's kind of cool about having people like that are better than you, it's like it pushes you to better yourself.
Yeah.
So I'm pretty grateful that I was able to connect with Sam quite a bit this season. We talked a lot. My son gravitated towards him a lot. My son even says, like, I was doing my cardio and I'm like, he's counting my trophies in my office. He's like, Dad, you got a lot of trophies. Like, how many? I'm like, I don't know. And he goes, I bet you Sam has more. So he's like, you need to work harder, Dad. I'm like, okay. But yeah, just having someone like that competition, it just pushes you to better yourself. So I'm pretty thankful that even though, I didn't maybe win those shows, it made me even better.
Yeah. No, I think that's really nice when I saw that kind of relationship between you two. And it's really nice. And that's what bodybuilding, I feel like, should be about, like the positive, like relationships that you develop and you push each other to be better, and kind of you might tease each other that like, oh, I'm going to get you, or like I'm going to beat you on the day, but sometimes you see it turn the other way and it can be kind of almost aggressive and not nice. So I'm glad that you guys had that, and that's the bodybuilding I love. And something you mentioned actually I wanted to touch on, because I think it's super valuable for a lot of the listeners, is obviously you have a family and you've taken them through multiple preps. And I guess maybe this one was the best in terms of how you approach that. Have you found any kind of strategies that you've used personally that have allowed you to kind of make it as well balanced as possible so that they don't end up kind of hating you going through prep, and every time you talk about prep, they're like, no, Jeff, please don't?
I would like to think I did a good job and the best job I've ever done. Verdict's still out on that. You would have to probably ask my wife that.
I'll get them on for an interview.
I'm like, yeah, maybe that's a good idea. Maybe not. I might hear the real truth. But I would say that from my perspective, I do the best I can to balance those two things out. But like I said, when you're like hyper focused on trying to get your body in a state that it really doesn't want to be in, we're forcing it to do what it doesn't want to do, that you're not going to be 100% yourself. So 1,700 calories, 15,000 steps. Some other people even dig harder than that, and I, as a coach too, I take that into consideration. I'm like, okay, if I'm going to dig this person really, really hard like this, I have to think about, okay, how's it going to impact maybe those around, like their real life? So it's like, I want to try to get on stage, like at Worlds, like, I wanted to be top 5. But the last 2 weeks, to be honest with you, I stopped pushing. I stopped. It was like, I think it was about 10 days out. I'm like, you know what? I'm done trying to get leaner, because I knew I needed to be a little bit leaner to, take it to another level for Worlds. I'm like, you know what? If I do that, that means I'm going to have to double down on cardio again. I'm going to have to drop my calories even further. And I didn't want to put my family through 2 more weeks of it. And I know that sounds kind of strange. Like, what do you mean, Jeff? It's only 2 more weeks. But it's 14 months that I put them through that lifestyle. So I didn't want to be selfish anymore. I was like, and physically and mentally, I was done. I was so tired. I'm like, I'm done. Like, it's not worth it to me. I know I'm going to do this again. Like, I knew I wasn't going to retire after this year. So I'm okay with where I'm at now. Like, if there's nothing for me to prove. And like I said, as much as I feel like I did a good job of balancing it out, I know deep down they're still impacted from it.
Yeah.
And it's proof to me, especially too, after the Worlds was over. Now I'm 2 weeks post show and they can see the difference. They've even mentioned it. So I know, okay, they feel it. They may not, like my wife is not a complainer. She won't say, hey, you're being an asshole or anything. She just kind of just like, if I am, she'll just ignore it and just kind of move on with her day. But yeah, to me, I didn't want to put them through it. So I'm not perfect. Like, I'm still working on it. And That's why I'm not going to compete again next year. It's like,
Yeah.
I can definitely compete next year if I really wanted to. It's like, okay, yeah, just go back to what I've been doing the last 14 months. It's a lifestyle. But it's like, I've had my fun this year. Now it's their turn. It's like, okay, now I need to be more present for them for 2020. And then 2021, I'll go ahead and do it again.
And you were still managing. I know I at least one holidays in my mind where I think you went to Mexico, and I saw you working out with a water. Well, it wasn't a water bottle. It was like a big water jug, and you were doing kind of your workouts there. So, how did you kind of balance holidays and like nutrition? How was that? Did you enjoy the holidays, or were they more of a kind of almost like a bit of a mission to get through in a sense?
Yeah, so to be honest, my wife surprised me with that holiday. She's like, yeah, I booked this Mexico trip. And I was like, in my mind, I'm like, why did you book this right a month before Worlds, you know? So I'm like, all right, it is what it is, right? I got to try to have fun with it. So to be very honest, I probably would have had more fun if I was drinking margaritas versus protein shakes on the beach. But I made the most of it. And I just made sure that, like, you know, whatever goes in my mouth, that doesn't mean that's not going to dictate fun, right?
Yeah.
I mean, so it's like, okay, if I have a chicken breast at restaurants, vegetables, I mean, yeah, I'd rather have enchiladas or whatever. But I mean, I made it work. Trained with a water jug. So there was a gym. There was like because the resort we stayed at had a plush gym, but you had to pay like, it was like one of those fancy resorts where you had to pay a lot of money for this country club, like gym. I'm like, man, I'm not paying all that money. And plus I didn't want to go spend 2 hours of my day, take away from family vacation. So I'm like, okay, I get up in the morning, have a cup of coffee, the water jug filled up. It's like 40 pounds all the way filled. I'm like, I can do things with that, you know, while my son's watching cartoons. So I was working out with him while he's watching TV. So I was interacting with him. And it just kind of made it a part of the vacation. And then after I was done training, then obviously it was like, okay, now we can go on with our day as a family, go to the beach or whatever. And I knew I was probably going to have more steps on the vacation than I did here at the house sitting at my desk. So I knew even if I wasn't 100% perfect with macros, because the only food that I like really tracked really hard was breakfast, because that was the only meal I ate at the house there. Everything else was like lunch and dinner was like we were eating out at restaurants. So I knew I wasn't 100% accurate, but I knew, okay, being active was going to basically make up for it.
Yeah.
And basically I got back from the week-long trip and I was right around the same weight, but actually visibly looked a little bit leaner. So it was productive. But yeah, to be honest though, yeah, it probably would have been more fun, like I said, if I was able to eat freely and things like that.
No doubt.
But that's the mindset. Like, going into it, I could have had a pessimistic attitude.
Yeah.
You know, hey, oh shit, oh, I got a vacation on my prep. This is going to be hard, sucks, I can't eat. But I was like, no, I'm going to make the most of it and just try to make the environment conducive towards prep and life. So I think we made it work pretty good. Even my wife said, just do what you do at the house. Just do it in Mexico.
Yeah.
It was actually the week after that kind of got me a little bit more challenging. It was the week after we did a guest posing in Mexico City. So I got sick the first time in Mexico from I drank some soda that had like ice in it, and I think the ice got me. Got sick, then I came back, and then when I went back to Mexico City on the way back, same thing happened at the airport. I drank a soda, had ice in it, didn't think, got super sick. So that 2-week stretch, I got sick twice, and then 2 weeks after that was Worlds. And to be honest, Worlds, I haven't seen the professional pictures yet, but I think it might have been like not my best look,
right?
Out of the entire prep, and I think just my body was just like, what's going on here?
Yeah,
you know, you've been sick twice. Yeah, it was hard for me to train and things like that.
I guess when you're dieting and you're so lean as well, your immunity becomes a bit suppressed. So you might have been able to fight off a little bit when you're kind of in normal Jeff mode, but when you've been dieting that long, it's just the little things can catch you.
Yeah, it was just, again, like that goes back to like the failed prep, the training, like how important the training is. Like that first prep, it was because of the training why things failed and didn't work out too well. The last month here, the training wasn't too ideal. Like training with a water jug, I mean, yeah, I made it work, but it's not like you're lifting your normal stuff. So I think that impacted it. Then like you said, getting sick, body's just like, what's going on here? And like there was like a 2 or 3 week stretch where just training wasn't too ideal. And yeah, when you're severely like depleted or in that deficit, towards the tail end there, it's like, yeah, that training is so important.
And I
it
guess
just
this
wasn't
is,
there.
sorry, I was just going to say, I think it just kind of highlights how sensitive your body is when it's in that really lean state. It's just like if you're slightly off with your routine, with your training, with anything, if it's slightly off, you feel everything so much more. And I guess that's why such long preps, like how long yours was, to the end, I guess you can't. This is why it's unsustainable. You can't sustain such a thing.
Yeah.
Your body just, even if you can maintain your weight, your body's not going to look as good. It's going to look stressed.
Yeah, I think that's something that we talked about too. Like actually, Adam McDonald, athlete. Yep, because he stayed in the Airbnb with us for Worlds, Eric Helms. So that's a conversation we had about basically trying to hold on to conditioning that long. Like I think, like for me, I noticed my physique, like the last two shows, just did it. It was more like a tired look. Like you could just tell your body's starting to look a little tired. It's fading out, looks a little flatty. And same thing with Adam. He had a very long prep too. Like his best look was in July, and then we extended out a prep. Well, September he did well too in a show in Ireland. There, he won a show there, and then we tried to extend it out to Worlds. And it's kind of the same thing for me. Like that last 2-month stretch, it was like your body's like, yeah, you're holding on to your body weight. You're eating. You are eating enough, but it's just hard to keep that healthy look that long.
Yeah.
So what I've taken away from this prep, like the main thing is the next go round, it's not going to be as long. It's going to be like, okay, let me group 2 or 3 shows and 2 or 3 month stretch, and then I'm in and out, and that's it.
Yeah. I can see how, especially if you haven't planned to do as well as you do, and then you end up qualifying for things, and it's like, oh, my prep's just got extended by another 2 months, and then maybe it gets extended by another 2 months. And it's like, quickly a 6-month prep becomes like a 10-month prep, and you're like, okay, so, and you maybe could effectively peaked where you wanted to, but maybe have now peaked early. So I think that's really interesting. And in terms of where you are now, obviously I think you're going through the recovery diet. How's that individualized, like, to you? How's that looking for you specifically, Jeff?
So for me personally, like coming off, like the lowest calories I had at the end there was about 1,800 calories. So I went straight from 1,800, like on my low days, and like anywhere between 3 to 3,500. So I just increased the calories quite a bit, and the cardio I just eliminated altogether, just stopped doing it. And the goal was just like, hey, let's just gain some weight. And I wasn't really stressing on how I looked or anything like that, because my mentality is like, I just spent 14 months of my life hyper focused on a goal, and it took up a lot of energy. So hey, I can relax a little bit. It's okay if I don't look perfect, for like a 2, 3, 4 week stretch. Let's just get some body fat back on me. Let's feel good again. And let's eat some meals with the family where, I'm not eating chicken breasts, I'm actually eating what they're eating, and they can, because that was one thing my son was saying. He's like, Dad, are you going to be able to eat with me again? It wasn't like eat with him again, as in sitting down and eating together. It was more like, are you going to eat the same foods I am? So just kind of letting go of that hyper focus. That was kind of the big thing, and being okay with not looking shredded, because that's a big thing, I think, with a lot of people. It's like they work so hard to get a certain look, and then all of a sudden a week later, like, oh my gosh, it's gone.
Yeah.
And it's a big stressor. But for me, it's like I really kind of embraced that. I want to feel good again. I want to feel human again. And like a week or 2 later, like I said, I feel so much better. And even the workouts, like just the strength increase, just even the first 2 or 3 workouts, like, oh, okay, this is what it feels like to push these weights again. And I know like that's what's going to be conducive towards the next time I get on stage. So it's just more or less, I jacked my calories way up, but I've enjoyed myself. Like I said, when we first started the podcast, the last 4 days, I feel bloated. I'm up about 12 pounds. I'm like, okay, now I'm going to lower the calories down now. Like, okay, let me go from 3,000 anywhere now between 2,800. I'll be able to maintain the current weight I'm at. So it's like, if you think about it this way, the analogy, like you're getting on like right now I got off the freeway, like off the highway from prep, right? I'm off the highway. speeds come down. Okay. But now I have to get back on the freeway. So going towards off season, I have to put my foot on the gas in order to do that.
Mm-hmm.
But now I'm pretty much on the freeway now. I don't need to keep my foot way on the gas. So it's just a matter of, okay, let me just back the gas off and just cruise a little bit. And so that's why I'm bringing the calories down. Because otherwise, if I keep it at 3,000, 3,500, I'm going to keep gaining and it'll just be a little too quick. And then I will get uncomfortable where I'm like, yeah, I do look sloppy.
Yeah.
And the last thing I want to do is be like, oh, let's mini cut. Like, that is so unproductive right now at this point. I just spent 14 months cutting. Yeah.
Do you like from previous preps experience, do you have an idea of how long it's going to take you to feel completely normal? Or are you kind of not sure where that might be?
It's varied, I would say, over the years. The last time, like in 2014, I would say it was probably about 4 or 5 months later where I was like, oh, okay, yeah, I feel not food focused anymore. Libido is where it should be again and things like that. Like right now I can tell like the first week and a half before the Thanksgiving holiday, even though I was eating 3,000, 3,500, my sleep was terrible. Like, because at the end of prep, I was getting up at like 3 in the morning every night. And I was getting maybe 4 or 5 hours sleep average. And usually my normal is like 7 or 8 in the off season. And even like a week and a half later, eating that much, I was still getting up at 3. So I knew like just from that, I'm like not even close to being normal. And libido, yeah, I'd still rather eat a cheeseburger. Yeah. So yeah, so I'm not there yet. But it's better. Like the last 4 or 5 days, I've been sleeping through the night. So I'm just feeling way better just because of that. So we're getting there, but I would say maybe a couple more months, maybe.
Yeah. It's surprising how quick a lot of things come back rapidly and then it kind of slows down. I guess like the weight gain, ideally how you want that to go. It's interesting you brought up sleep. I just always find it interesting because sleep, obviously, just when you diet and when you're that lean, just goes pretty poor. How many like times through the night would you wake up during prep?
Oh man, I would say probably like once I got to a certain level of leanness. So from the month of August, because I was probably in like August, September is when I got where my leanest state was, and I kind of maintained that for the most part. I might have gotten a little bit leaner deeper into it, but from that point until the end of prep is when my sleep was like bad. Like melatonin and all that. Yeah, it gets you to sleep, but doesn't keep you asleep. Yeah. So I was popping up like most nights, like I say, I would get up about 3. So I was only getting like 4 or 5 hours.
Yeah.
And even before that, I would like get up about 12 or 1. And, the old bladder's like, hey, you need to empty this out. So it was like just disrupted sleep and just not that much sleep in general. And that's huge.
It beats you up.
It does. Yeah. So
I always think, sleep for me from my last prep, I remember I think I woke up 6 times for quite a while. I was just waking up and I thought I needed to pee or I just had to get up. And then it took a long time for that to come down to eventually I was sleeping through the night, which was like, where did this come from? I haven't slept through the night in years. So, and then libido again, I think is an easy one to kind of have a bit of a track of to know if you're back where you should be.
Yeah. Like even like, and then caffeine intake, like for me, it kind of got elevated too. Cause like during the day, you're just like, I need to pick me up.
Yeah.
So like you start leaning on caffeine a little bit more than you'd like. So that was one aid that I was using towards the end. But yeah, so if you think about it, I mean, it's like, post show, it's nice to look aesthetically pleasing, like shredded. Like I would love to maintain like that shredded physique year round. It looks awesome, right? That's what we work so hard for. But all those side effects to it, it's like it wears on you.
Yeah.
So for me, it's like I'll admit, in my past, like it would be hard to put that weight on and see yourself go. But now it's like I've kind of embraced, like that's what I was gunning for out the gates. Like, let me look soft, please. Like I was just like, just so I can feel good. And what's interesting too, like back in the 90s when I first started competing, there was no reverse dieting or recovery diet. Like the mentality back then, we're not as educated as we are now, but back then it was like show's over, eat. Let's put the weight back on. Let's get in the gym and kick some ass. So it's kind of like I've again gone back to my roots with that mindset and mentality. So it's interesting how like past experiences you tend to, use bits and pieces as you move forward in your journey, which is kind of cool. So I've done a lot of reflecting the last 2 weeks, obviously.
It's it always not surprises me, but you hear all the kind of the bro science, and that's then put into the science, and quite often the science ends up proving a lot of the things that the bros used to do, because they do it through experience. So a lot of it is frustrating, but at the same time it's kind of confirming a lot of, if you're doing something and it's working, like, don't feel bad if it's not proven yet. So I think that's really nice. Something I did want to touch on, I didn't skip over it, but I forgot to talk about peak week for yourself, Jeff. I don't know if obviously you had 7 shows, so I don't know if you tried any different things this season, or tried different peaks, and if anything, kind of, if you feel like you learned anything or it confirmed any thoughts to you, because I feel like you've had a bit of a conservative peaking methodology in general. I kind of quote you often saying, like, peak week is the week not to fuck up, or something along those lines.
It was like, I'd say over the 7 shows, like, I didn't do things identical. Like, I experimented a little bit here and there to kind of to learn more about myself. The first show for Mayhem, it was just more or less, hey, let's have a couple of refeed days on Thursday, Friday. Because I did a lot of digging leading into that show. And I knew, like, if I wasn't a little assertive on loading, that I would be a little on the flatter side. So it was more or less like, keep water intake up, don't manipulate sodium too much, just keep the variables in check. The only thing that changed was, like, the carbohydrate level. Like, so Thursday, Friday was like 500 carb days, coming from like right around 250. So it was like doubling carbs up. And it worked pretty well. Like, that first show, I looked very full on stage, hard for the level of leanness I was at that point, and I had a good look for that show. The following show, again, doing a lot of digging. So context leading into shows huge. Like I was like digging hard for those first 2 shows. So I was more in a depleted state. So I knew I needed to be assertive loading going into the shows, not to look flat. So I did more or less kind of the same. The only thing is, I only did 1 loading day for the second show. I'm like, okay, let me dig harder, because I was like, I got to get lean like Sam. I got to get leaner than Sam. So I was like, let me push harder to get the conditioning. So I just pushed the dieting days out further, and I went Friday was a big high day. I think it was like right around 900 grams of carbs, coming from like 200. Water intake was high, sodium and all that was, it was obviously higher because of the higher food intake. And I peaked pretty well for that show again. So it kind of worked there. And then I'm trying to think what the third show was. The third show was a guest posing. So that one, I decided to go a little bit more conservative. So leading up to it, I wasn't grinding as hard. I kind of pulled back because I had like a diet break after the second show. So I wasn't in a depleted state as I was earlier in the prep. So it was more or less, okay, on the day before the show, it was like just like a moderate refeed day. So it was about 450 carbs. And what I did there was I tried to keep, sodium not too high, kept it a little bit tame, and water intake I actually cut back a little bit from my normal amount. I want to experiment with that a little bit. So usually I would take in, like before shows, upwards of 2 gallons of water, so close to 7 liters. But for that one, on the day before, I kept it at about 3.5 liters, so about a gallon. And then before the actual getting on stage, I kept it to about 20 ounces of water per meal and nothing in between. And it actually was one of my better peaks. So I was like, okay, I think cutting a little bit of water for me is actually better. So I kind of kept that approach for the NPC show I did in Sacramento. That was in early November. I actually cut my water for that show. I told the guys, like, I'm actually going to cut some water and just experiment here. It's an NPC show. It doesn't really mean anything. So I actually was probably the best peaked there. Like, that was my hardest look. The carbs were high. Like, I kept carbs high, Thursday, Friday, loaded up, but kept the water tame. So it was like maybe Friday, the day before, or like not even a gallon, maybe 3/4 of a gallon. And the show day, about 1/2 gallon. And I actually looked harder there. So I think personally for me, it's like actually limiting water intake is actually better for me personally. Like that's not something I recommend for 95% of my athletes. It's usually opposite. And then going into worlds, I probably should have listened to what I did at the NPC show. So I went back to going higher water, higher carbs. And I still don't know the full verdict because I haven't seen professional pictures, but I just think from some of the pictures I've seen and just by gauging what I was looking like in the mirror and stuff, I looked harder at by limiting water a little bit for me.
Very interesting.
Which is interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's like, sometimes it's like, you look at some of the science or some of what the other people are doing out there and you're like, okay, it makes sense to like go with the grain. But for me, it's like actually learn like going against the grain for me personally might be the better option. Now, who's to say in the next prep that works? It might not work next time. So it's one of those things where I don't think over the years I've done close to 40 shows. Like I haven't had like, let's say that quote unquote perfect peak yet.
Yeah. Yeah. It's kind of frustrating because there is no black and white answer, but it's just, and there's no kind of one way to peak every single prep. You might have, your physiology is changing every peak you do in an entire prep, let alone every year that you end up doing it. So it's interesting to experiment, and I guess you made small changes. They weren't kind of like drastic. So you knew nothing too much was going to go wrong.
No, I think that the one of the shows I'm like, you know what, I'm going to duplicate what I do after my refeeds. Because on Monday when I go to train my upper body session, I look great. Like Mondays after these refeeds during the training session look like my best. So it was the second show. That's what I basically did, is I duplicated that. So I'm like, okay, I'm going to get on stage at around this time. So I'll just pretend that's when I'm doing my upper body training session, and I mimicked everything. And it worked out pretty good. But again, when I think back, like, okay, I want to look at show number 5 or whatever number it was when I cut some water down, I actually look harder there. But that just could be me too, like, because you also have to take into consideration too, like stage lighting.
Yeah.
It's not always the same show to show. Photo quality, cameras are different, whoever's taking the pictures. So it could be in my mind too, just like the perception, based off of the lighting and the camera. Maybe it's not true. Maybe I did peak better at Worlds. I don't know. Yeah,
it's so true. The lighting makes a huge difference. Lighting and the camera quality and everything makes an insane difference. So I can absolutely see that.
Also, too, is who you're standing next to. Like, when you're like the guys at the NPC, like I was the leanest one up there.
Right.
So of course I'm gonna think, I peaked pretty well there. Whereas at Worlds, it's like everybody's peaked well.
Yeah.
So if you're off 5% and they're on, you're going to look soft. Like, okay, in my mind, I didn't cut water there. I'm thinking maybe I should have cut water. Maybe I shouldn't have. Maybe it's just, again, the lighting, who you're standing next to. Man, it can be frustrating, assessing that.
Absolutely. So Jeff, to finish, first of all, what was your most kind of cherished or best or proud moment during prep? And then what are your goals from here on for your kind of improvement season, off season?
It's not the placings. Like I placed very well, like in almost all the shows, like placed really well. But at that stuff, I'm like, it's more like that first show, getting, sharing the 10-year anniversary of 3DMJ with Eric, Alberto, Brad, all the athletes we had there at that show, having my dad in the audience, my wife, those are the things that are going to just last a lifetime.
Yeah.
And each show had its own experience. And it's usually like the placings are usually like second thought. It's always like, oh yeah, that second show I did where I was trying to beat Sam. Well, after the show was over, we walked backstage. After I learned I was second, I FaceTime my son. And the first thing he says to me is, "Where's Sam?" So I go and hand the phone to Sam. Sam gets the phone and starts chopping it up with my son for about 3 minutes. And he was talking to somebody else, but he stopped his conversation to talk to my son. Like those are the little moments that are going to stick with me more so than, hey, I placed second in a WNBF show. Like that stuff's going to fade out. So that's, for me, it's like, just even though my prep was a little long and probably extended out a little too long, saw my body deteriorate a little bit, but man, I don't regret it because I had so much fun from show 1 all the way to show 7. And that's why I'm going to do it again. Like it wasn't, for me, it's not like, hey, going into 2021, trying to get back to worlds, because that's the goal. It's not like, hey, I want to win a world championship. I mean, if it happens, that's awesome. But it's more like, I want more fun. Like, I want to continue to have the fun I had. So, I mean, the game plan now, it's like for 2020 is just to continue what I've been doing, really. I'm not going to, alter a game plan too much. I'm just going to eat more food and try not to hurt myself. That's the main thing. But I mean, I would like to a couple body parts try to bring up. And so, yeah, I'm going to try to, maybe bring a little bit of volume up, but it's not going to be overly aggressive. Like, I need to bring my shoulders up a little bit. So it's like, okay, let me do some laterals, after a leg workout. Like, let me just run the rack, like, I'm not going to, go all crazy and do like, I'm going to increase my frequency 5 times per week or anything like that. Cause I know for me, it's just going to lead to overuse injuries. Like, if I can't walk 15,000 steps without hurting myself, I'm not going to be able to train 6-7 days a week, So.
Yeah. Fantastic, Jeff. I love that perspective. And I guess I don't know if, has there been previous preps that you haven't loved as much? And is there any differences between those? It sounds like you get your family kind of involved, at least from your stories and from what I've heard. You talk to your son a lot and you kind of have him involved a lot, which is lovely to see. And I guess maybe other people would try and remove themselves from that, or and obviously you have, 3DMJ are huge. So you obviously have like a lot of contacts and people that support you. Do you think that kind of makes it what you love? Is that what you love about it?
Oh yeah, for sure. Like, obviously when you have those you love that are supporting you, that are with you. And the one thing I learned from Smiley Elmore Jr., who was one of our sponsored athletes back in the day, he was like, Jeff, make him a part of it. And it's like so simple advice, right? But it's huge. It could just be like my son and I just doing a selfie in the mirror. Like, just having him be a part of it makes him feel special. That makes me feel special. There was lots of bike rides and walks I did with my stepdaughter where we talked about life and helped her to learn to grow, as a teenager. And, again, just having my wife involved and all that. I mean, that's what, for me anyways, what it's all about. And, I guess my earlier days, it was more around trying to win at all costs. And for me, like, the cost was a lot of poor relationships. And so that's what I try to strive to show to people is that, hey, you got to try to be as human as possible while you do this, because, it is very consuming. It is an obsessive sport. It can be. So that for me is pretty important. And I think what I love too about this prep is that I was able to share it with others, and the feedback I was getting was positive on how it's helped others, whether it's inspiring people or it's having them, balancing out the sport more, or, just relaxing a little bit, maybe on, if they're over analyzers, they're like, okay, I can actually relax a little bit. I don't have to be perfect. So there's just that feeling of like being able to share and, not just help myself, but help others through the sport. So it's kind of a cool thing. And that's why I keep doing it. It's fun.
Yeah. No, that's great. I love hearing that. And I think you do a fantastic job at sharing. And especially because I think there's a lot of people who are at your level who don't, and who kind of keep it to themselves. But you do share it, and you do a fantastic job of that. So if people want to kind of learn more about kind of you and follow your journey into your next kind of season, your off season right now, and maybe look back at some of your old posts, if they're entering like a 2020 prep, I'll probably be looking over some of your old posts to keep me a little bit sane. Where should they head?
Instagram. So 3DMJ Godfather on Instagram. That's probably the main platform. And then there's a little bit on YouTube. So 3DMJ/Team 3DMJ YouTube. That's probably the two best ones.
And then they can hear you as well. You've got your own kind of Team 3DMJ podcast. You've spoken bits about your prep over there as well, haven't you?
Yeah. So yeah, the 3DMJ podcast. We definitely do that. And actually you, Steve, the first person to talk about our prep, which I know you spoke bits about kind of it here and there, but not a full interview. That's good. Yeah. So this is the first one. And I think outside of 3D Muscle Journey, like, you definitely are the first person I would love to share this all with. So I'm glad I had the opportunity.
Awesome. Well, guys, thank you very much for listening. Thank you, Jeff, tremendously for coming on. It's always a pleasure, and we will catch you soon.